The day I came home and found every photograph of my late wife replaced, I didn't yet know it was a $36 billion problem hiding in plain sight. They had erased her from the walls of our home, but she had left an answer for me, taped to the backs of the very frames they threw away. My name is David. For 2 years after my wife Sarah's passing, I thought the greatest loss was her absence. Then my son married Alina, and the carefully arranged photos in my hallway became the first battlefield in a silent, calculated war for everything she and I had built. This is what financial exploitation looks like when it wears the face of family, and my late wife had been preparing me for it long before I ever saw it coming. Sarah and I were married for 38 years. She was a middle school art teacher who believed beauty was a form of memory. Every wall in our home told a story she'd curated: our son Michael's first steps, vacations to Maine, the way the light hit her face the year she beat cancer. When she passed, those frames became my anchor. I'd walk the hallway each morning, touch the glass over her smile, and remember how to breathe. For 2 years, that ritual was my entire compass. My son Michael is a good man, a gentle man. He worked as a paralegal, believed in systems and procedures, and inherited his mother's deep-seated trust in people's good intentions. He was 32 and lonely when he met Alina at a friend's wedding. She was vibrant, 10 years younger, with a laugh that filled rooms and an intensity in her eyes that Michael mistook for passion. I saw it differently. I saw the calculation behind the charm, the way her questions about my property, my investments, my health came wrapped in flattery. "You're so put together for a widower, David. This house is amazing. It must be worth a fortune now." They married quickly, a small ceremony in her parents' backyard. I paid for most of it, not because they asked, but because Michael looked happy in a way he hadn't since Sarah died, and I would have paid anything to keep that look on his face. Alina's family was there in force. Her father, Robert, a man with a too-firm handshake and stories about real estate deals that never quite closed. Her mother, Diane, who complimented the silverware and then asked me what brand it was. And her older brother, Marcus, who spent the reception on his phone, scowling at the screen. I wrote it off as wedding day stress. That was my first mistake. Alina's family lived 40 minutes away in a condo complex that always seemed to be between management companies. Robert had a vague consulting job. Diane dabbled in interior design. There was always a crisis, a car repair, a medical bill, a special assessment fee from the condo board. The stories started a few months after the wedding, usually delivered by Alina over Sunday dinners at my house. She'd frame them as casual updates, but her eyes would flick to me, gauging reaction. "Dad's client still hasn't paid him. Mom's thinking of selling her vintage vase collection to make ends meet." Michael would nod, sympathetic, and suggest small ways to help. I stayed quiet. It wasn't my business. Then the asks began, small at first. Could they borrow $500 to cover a utility bill? Could I recommend a good financial advisor, since mine had done so well for me? Then 6 months in, Alina arrived with blueprints. She'd drawn up plans to convert my detached garage into a mother-in-law suite for her parents. "It would be an investment, David," she said, spreading the papers on my kitchen table, the same table where Sarah used to grade her students' projects. "They could pay you modest rent, you'd have the company, and we could sell their condo and use the equity to fix up this place. It's a win for everyone." I felt the room tilt. The garage was where Sarah had kept her pottery wheel, where the smell of clay and glaze still lingered. "This is my home, Alina," I said, keeping my voice even, "not an investment property." She smiled, a tight, patient smile. "Of course, I just think Sarah would have wanted her space to be used, to help family." She used my wife's name like a key, trying to pick a lock I didn't know I had. I said I'd think about it. I did not think about it. I lay awake and felt a cold, familiar dread, the same feeling I got before a structural inspection when I knew, in my gut, the foundation was compromised. I called Michael the next day, just Michael. I told him the garage was not for rent, that his mother's memory lived in that dust, and that some boundaries were not meant to be blueprinted. He sounded relieved. "She's just trying to help her parents, Dad. They're in a bind, but I'll tell her no," he told her. She did not accept no. Followed was a campaign so subtle I almost missed its architecture. Alina began helping around the house. She'd stop by when I was at my weekly volunteer shift at the library. I'd come home to find furniture rearranged, cabinets reorganized, Sarah's favorite vase moved to a high shelf where I couldn't reach it. I just thought it looked cluttered, David, she'd say. Modern living is about clean lines. My home was being edited, Sarah's aesthetic slowly erased under the banner of minimalism. Michael saw nothing wrong. She's just trying to make it easier for you, Dad. The pressure escalated in whispers. Diane called to thank me for considering the garage idea. Robert texted me links to articles about the loneliness of widowers. Marcus, the brother I'd met once, sent me a Facebook friend request, then posted public memes about greedy baby boomers hoarding housing stock. The message was clear: my space, my assets, my quiet life were a moral failing, a family problem I was refusing to solve. Then one Tuesday in October, I came home from the library and felt it before I saw it. The light was wrong. The hallway was brighter, hollow. I stood in the foyer, my coat still on, and my breath left my body. Every single photograph of Sarah was gone. The wedding portrait, the candid shot from Maine, the picture of her laughing with a glob of clay on her nose. In their places were generic, framed prints of landscapes and abstract art, cheap, mass-produced things. The wall where her gallery had been was now a hotel lobby. I called Michael, my hands shaking. He answered on the third ring. Dad, everything okay? The pictures I managed, all of Sarah's pictures, they're gone. There was a long silence. Then Alina's voice came on the line, bright and efficient. Oh, David, I meant to tell you, those old frames were so dated, and all those photos of the past. It's not healthy to dwell. I picked out some fresh, uplifting art. It'll help you turn the page. I didn't shout, I didn't cry. A terrible, cold clarity washed over me. This wasn't insensitivity. This was territorial. Erase the wife, claim the widower, claim the house. I hung up the phone. I walked to the first replaced frame, a bland print of a birch forest. My hands, steady now, took it off the wall. And there, taped to the back of the cheap new frame, was the corner of a different, older piece of paper. A familiar, looping handwriting I hadn't seen in 2 years. Sarah's handwriting. It was just a sliver peeking out from behind the cardboard, but it was enough. My heart hammered against my ribs. I took down the next frame, and the next. Behind every single one, taped to the wall or stuck to the back of the original frames they discarded, were documents, dozens of them. Bank statements I didn't recognize, photocopies of checks, a handwritten letter in Sarah's script. It looked like she had methodically hidden a paper trail across our entire home, knowing one day I might need to follow it. I sat on the floor of my bright, hollow hallway, surrounded by generic art, holding the first page she'd left for me. The heading was clear. It was a bank statement. The account name was not mine. It was Alina's. And the first transaction, dated 3 months before Sarah died, was a $50,000 transfer from an account I'd never heard of. The memo line read, "Investment family property." For a minute, I just sat there on the floor, the paper trembling in my hand. $50,000, transferred 3 months before Sarah's stroke. From an account I'd never seen to an account in Alina's name. The memo, "Investment family property," felt like a cold blade sliding between my ribs. My wife had been trying to tell me something, and I had been too deep in grief to hear her. I worked methodically, the way I used to approach a failing structure. Assess, document, stabilize. I took down every replaced frame in the house, 27 of them. Behind each one, Sarah had secreted a piece of the puzzle. It wasn't random. She had organized them chronologically, starting in the hallway and moving into the living room, each document a step in a story she knew I'd need to follow. The next page was a handwritten ledger, Sarah's elegant script detailing a series of loans to Robert and Diane. 5,000 here, 10,000 there, spanning the 2 years before her death. The notes were clinical. April 12th, Robert, medical emergency, $8,000 Michael vouched. July 3rd, Diane, condo special assessment, $12,500 pressure via Alina. My son had been used as a character reference. The total, just from this ledger, was over $80,000. Money I never knew we had. Money from an account Sarah had apparently managed separately. Then came the first letter. It was addressed to me, dated just 2 weeks before her stroke. "My dearest David, it began. If you're reading this, then the worst has happened, and my fears were correct. I'm so sorry to leave you with this mess. I've been documenting things because something is very wrong. Alina's family is not just struggling, they are extracting. The stories are inconsistent. The emergencies are perpetual. and the amounts they ask for through Michael are always just below the threshold that would make you say no outright. It's a strategy. I opened a separate savings account years ago with an inheritance from my aunt. I never told you because you'd have insisted we use it for a vacation. I'm glad I didn't. It become my proof. They've been asking Michael to get you to add their names to the house deed. For estate planning, they say, to avoid probate. Do not do this, David. It's the house. It's always been about the house. I love you. I'm trying to protect you. Forgive me for the secrecy. Always, Sarah. The date of the letter hit me 2 weeks before her stroke. The doctors said it was a cerebral aneurysm, a random, tragic weakness in a blood vessel, but Sarah had been under immense, hidden stress. The kind of stress that can elevate blood pressure. The kind of stress that can contribute to a catastrophic event. A new, sickening grief wrapped around the old one. The next documents were photocopies, checks made out to Robert and Diane Hollies, endorsed and deposited, but the signatures on the front weren't mine. They were Sarah's. They were forgeries, good ones, but Sarah had circled subtle inconsistencies in the loops of the D asterisk in David and the S asterisk in Sarah. She'd even attached a sticky note with a sample of Michael's signature for comparison. It wasn't his either. The forger was skilled, but not perfect. Then I found the emails, printed out, with headers. They were between Alina and her brother Marcus. The first one was from over 3 years ago, 6 months before she even met Michael. Marcus, any progress on the target? Alina, still vetting. The one with the divorced dad in Westview is a possibility, but the property has liens. The widower's son is cleaner, paralegal, trusting. The asset is the father's house, free and clear. Estimated value 1.2 M. The father is the gatekeeper. Isolate, befriend, inherit. Marcus, timeline. Alina, 18-24 months post-marriage. Need to establish family need narrative first. The wife just died. Vulnerability is high. I had to put the page down. My kitchen, the site of so many of her cheerful dinners, swam in my vision. It was a business plan. My life, my loss, my son were all variables in a profit equation. Michael wasn't a mark to them. He was the access point, the human key to my front door. The next frame hid the real shock. It was a property record, a photocopy from the county assessor's office. It was for my house, but the owner wasn't just me. An addendum filed 8 months after Sarah's death, a month after Michael and Alina's wedding, listed a transfer on death beneficiary. It named Michael and Alina Hollies. My son's name was there, typed. His signature was on the line, and so was a signature above the line for witness notary. The notary stamp was blurry, but the name was clear, Marcus Hollies. My legs gave out. I sank into Sarah's rocking chair, a transfer on death deed. It's a simple instrument. When I die, the house bypasses my estate and goes directly to the named beneficiaries. No will, no probate, just a clean transfer, and someone had filed one, with a forged witness signature from a notary who happened to be the beneficiary's brother. But Sarah had caught it. She circled the filing date and the notary name, and she'd attached a second document, a letter from the county recorder's office, responding to an inquiry she'd made. It stated the filed document appeared proper, but that any challenge to its validity would require a forensic examination and likely legal action. She'd been investigating this after her diagnosis. She'd been racing against her own body to build a case. The final document from that night was a single, crisp page, a life insurance policy, my policy, the one I'd had for decades through my old engineering firm. The beneficiary had been changed. 2 years ago, 6 months before Sarah died, the primary beneficiary was no longer my wife. It was now the estate of David Mercer. And the contingent beneficiary, the one who gets it if my estate is the beneficiary, was listed as Michael Mercer per spousal directives. It was a clever, layered move. Changing it directly to Michael might have raised flags with the insurance company if I died unexpectedly, but naming my estate first added a buffer. And if Michael controlled my estate as the executor, which he likely would, the money would flow to him, and by extension to his wife. Sarah had highlighted the change order. The required signature was mine, and it was another forgery. I sat in the dark until sunrise. The documents spread around me like fallen leaves. The scale of it was breathtaking. This wasn't a grab for rent money or a garage apartment. This was a multi-year, multi-generational operation to seize a seven-figure asset through marriage, coercion, forgery, and ultimately waiting for me to die. The photo replacement wasn't just cruelty. It was a celebration. They'd removed the last visual obstacle. They were redecorating their future inheritance. I needed a lawyer, but not just any lawyer. I needed someone who understood fraud, elder law, and family dynamics so toxic they could kill. I thought of Sarah's attorney, Linda Ferris, who had helped with her will. I'd found her card, still tucked in Sarah's desk. A year ago, I called her at 8 a.m. on the dot. Her voice was calm, professional. "David, I've been wondering if you call." "You knew?" I asked, my voice raw. "Sarah came to me 3 times in her last year," Linda said. "She was gathering evidence. She was terrified for you. She made me promise that if anything happened to her, and if you called me sounding like you do right now, I was to see you immediately. Can you be in my office in an hour?" I brought the documents in 2 locked filing boxes. Linda Ferris's office was quiet, lined with legal books. She was in her 60s, with sharp eyes and a manner that didn't waste time. She read for 45 minutes straight, barely looking up. When she finished, she set the last page down gently. "David," she said, "this is one of the most premeditated cases of familial financial exploitation I have ever seen. What they've done, the forgeries, the fraudulent deed, the systematic grooming of your son, it's criminal. But it's also insulated. Michael is the shield. Every request, every pressure point goes through him. He may not know the full picture, but his compliance is their greatest asset." "What do I do?" I asked. "Do I call the police?" "Not yet," she said, steepling her fingers. "The police will see a family dispute. We need irrefutable, admissible evidence that proves criminal intent. The documents Sarah left are a roadmap, but they're hearsay unless we can authenticate them and prove the chain of fraud. We need to trap them in the act." Her plan was cold and precise. First, we would quietly, legally revoke the forged transfer on death deed and correct the life insurance beneficiary. She would file the paperwork under the guise of routine estate updates. Second, we would set up a new monitored bank account with a small amount of money, a honeypot. Third, and most dangerous, I had to act normal. I had to let them believe their plan was still on track. "You have to go home, David," Linda said, her gaze steady. "You have to hang those generic pictures back on the wall. You have to let Alina believe she's won this battle. We need them to make the next move. And when they do, we'll be recording it." Walking back into my house, into that hallway of erased memory, was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I picked up the birch forest print. I looked at the spot on the back where Sarah's note had been. Then I hung it back on the wall, covering the ghost of her warning. I was now an actor in my own home, playing the part of the defeated, lonely old man, the role they'd written for me. The pressure resumed within days. Alina came over with a peace offering, a casserole. She chatted brightly, her eyes scanning the walls, confirming her artwork was in place. "See, David, doesn't it feel more open, more future-focused?" "It's different," I said, forcing a tired smile. "Michael and I were thinking," she said, leaning forward. "With the housing market so hot, maybe it's time to talk about a reverse mortgage. Unlock the equity in this place for you. You could travel. We could even help manage the funds." The reverse mortgage, a classic tool to strip equity from an elderly homeowner, often leaving them with nothing. I nodded slowly, as if considering it. "That's an idea. Let me think about it." "Of course," she said, patting my hand. "No pressure." But the pressure was a tangible force. Robert called, his voice oozing false concern. "David, son, we're family now. We worry about you in this big house alone. We are here to help carry the load." The script was always the same. Your independence is a burden, your assets are a problem, and we are the solution. I followed Linda's instructions. I opened a new checking account with $15,000 from my real savings. I let it sit, and I waited. The trap sprung 4 weeks later. Michael came over alone, his face pale. "Dad," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Alina's parents, they're in a real bind. Their car got repossessed. They need first and last month's rent for a new place, but they're short. It's $12,000. I don't have it. Could you possibly help just this once? I'll pay you back." His words were a perfect echo of the script I'd read in Sarah's ledger. The ask was just below the obvious refusal threshold. The delivery was through the trusted son. I felt a profound sorrow for him. He was a puppet, believing he was pulling his own strings. "I want to help, Michael," I said, my heart breaking, "but things are tight for me right now. I have a new account I'm using for expenses. Let me see what I can move around." I didn't give him an answer that day. I called Linda. "It's time," I said. The next day, I invited Michael and Alina for dinner. I cooked Sarah's meatloaf recipe. I made small talk. Then, as we finished coffee, I sighed heavily. "About that money, Michael, I can do it. I've got a new account at First United. I can write a check." Alina's eyes flickered. "A check's no good, David," she said sweetly. "They need a cashier's check or a direct wire for the rental application. It's very urgent." "Oh," I said, feigning confusion. "I'm not good with wires. Could you help me if I give you the account details?" She tried to hide her triumph. "Of course, that's what family is for." I handed her a piece of paper with the account and routing number for the monitored Honeypot account. She took a picture of it with her phone. "I'll have my dad's rental agent take care of it tomorrow. Thank you, David. You're saving them." 2 days later, Linda called. Her voice was grim. "They didn't wait. The wire wasn't for 12,000, David. They tried to initiate a transfer for the entire 15,000, and the recipient wasn't a rental agency. It was an account in the name of Marcus Hollies. They'd gotten greedy. They'd seen the full balance and gone for it all." Linda had alerted the bank. The transfer was frozen, pending verification. We had our first live, actionable evidence of attempted fraud. "Now," Linda said, "now we go on the offensive. But David, you need to understand. When we expose this, it will detonate your family. Michael will be in the middle. He may not forgive you." I looked at the blank space on the wall where Sarah's photo had been. I thought of her letter, her fear, the stress she shouldered alone. "The family I'm trying to save," I said quietly, "has already been detonated. Let's do what Sarah would have wanted." The next morning, I walked into my local police station with Linda Ferris by my side and 2 boxes of evidence in my hands. I was no longer just a widower. I was a plaintiff. And the first person I was going to have to confront with the truth was my own son. Filing a police report against your own family feels like performing surgery on yourself without anesthetic. The detective, a man named Hayes with tired eyes, listened as Linda laid out the chronology, the forgeries, the fraudulent deed, the attempted wire transfer. He flipped through Sarah's ledger. "This is premeditated," he finally said. "But the son, he's the linchpin. We need to understand what he knew." I asked for 24 hours before they contacted Michael. I needed to tell him myself. Linda argued against it. Detective Hayes was neutral. I insisted. This was my son. However this ended, he needed to hear the truth from me first. I called him that evening. My voice was steady, a bridge I was about to burn. "Michael, I need to see you now. It's about Alina, and it's about your mother." He heard the gravity. He came alone. He sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where Alina had unrolled her blueprints. I didn't hand him everything at once. I started with Sarah's letter, the one to me. I watched his face as he read his mother's words, her fear, her documentation, her warning about the house. His expression moved from confusion to disbelief to a slow, dawning horror. This can't be right," he whispered. "Mom was sick. She was paranoid after the diagnosis." "Read the next one," I said, my voice quiet. I handed him the forged check copies with Sarah's circles around the signatures, then the email printout between Alina and Marcus, the one discussing him as the target and me as the asset. He read the email twice. The color drained from his face. He pushed the paper away as if it were hot. "This is a fake. Someone fabricated this to break us apart." "The police have the originals now, Michael," I said. "They've subpoenaed the email server. It's not fake." I placed the final document in front of him, the transfer on death deed with his signature and the notary stamp of his brother-in-law, Marcus. "Did you sign this?" He stared at it, his eyes glazed over, then focused with terrifying intensity. "Yes," he breathed, "but Alina said it was a standard beneficiary update for your will. She said you discussed it, that you wanted to avoid probate. She had Marcus notarize it as a favor. She said it was just a backup document. He looked up at me, his eyes begging. Dad, I would never. I believed him. In that moment, I saw the entire ugly mechanism. They hadn't needed a villain in Michael. They needed a tool, a trusting, grief-stricken tool who loved his new wife and wanted to help his widowed father. They fed him half-truths and manufactured consents, using his love as the delivery system for every fraudulent document. They played you, son, I said, the anger finally breaking through my calm. They played both of us, but your mother, she was watching, she saw it. The dam broke. He put his head in his hands and sobbed, great, shuddering gasps of shame and betrayal. I let him cry. I didn't touch him. The space between us was filled with too many lies. When he finally looked up, raw and shattered, his next question was the most important one. What did I do? You were used, I said. Now you have to choose. You can stay used or you can help me fix it. He chose. He gave a formal statement to Detective Hayes the next day, detailing every request, every signed document, every conversation he now understood in a horrifying new light. His statement turned the case from a they said, family dispute into a prosecutable conspiracy. The district attorney's office took interest. Financial crimes, forgery, attempted grand theft, elder exploitation. But here's the thing about predators. When cornered, they don't apologize, they attack. Elena's family lawyered up with a slick attorney named Carl Thorne. Their strategy wasn't defense, it was deflection. They launched a preemptive civil suit against me for undue influence and emotional abuse of Michael. They claimed I had coerced his statement, that I was a grieving, mentally declining widower manipulating my son to cut off his new family. They filed for a temporary restraining order to keep me from contacting Michael, a move so brazen it took Linda's breath away. Worse, they went public, not with the truth, but with a story. Diane, Elena's mother, gave a tearful interview to a local news blog. She painted a picture of a cruel, wealthy father-in-law who refused to help his struggling family, who was now making outlandish accusations to destroy his son's marriage. The comments section filled with venom. Strangers called me a monster. My quiet life in my hometown evaporated. The police investigation became a race against their smear campaign. Detective Hayes, now fully engaged, discovered that Marcus Hollies' notary license had lapsed 2 years prior. Every document he'd stamped since then was invalid. That included our deed, but also documents for at least 7 other property transactions. A pattern emerged. Linda hired a private investigator. What he found was the "it gets worse" moment that redefined the entire scale of their operation. Elena's family had a history, not a criminal one, they were too careful for that, but a pattern of transactional relationships. Robert had been sued twice by previous business partners for misappropriated funds. Diane had been named in a civil judgment for unpaid debts that mysteriously coincided with her daughter's previous engagement to a man whose father owned a lucrative car dealership. That engagement ended abruptly when the father died suddenly, and the inheritance was locked in a trust they couldn't access. We weren't their first target. We were their most promising one, a widower with a clear title house, a lonely son, and a life insurance policy. We were the big score. Armed with this, Linda and the DA moved to the offensive. They convened a grand jury. The evidence was presented. Sarah's documents, the forged signatures analyzed by a forensic examiner, the fraudulent notary stamp, the attempted wire transfer, and now the testimony of Michael and the pattern of prior behavior. The indictments came down on a cold Tuesday in March. Robert Hollies, forgery, conspiracy to commit theft, filing a false instrument. Diane Hollies, conspiracy, attempted grand theft. Marcus Hollies, forgery, false notarization, conspiracy. Elena Hollies, conspiracy to commit theft, forgery, financial exploitation of an elder. They were arrested at their separate homes. The local news, which had given Diane a platform for her sob story, now ran mugshots. The fallout was instantaneous and brutal. Elena, released on bail, showed up at my door, not the calculated charmer, but a cornered animal. "You destroyed my family," she screamed, her face contorted. "You took everything from me." I stood in the doorway, the wood of the frame solid under my hand. "No," I said, my voice low. You tried to take everything from me. You tried to erase my wife. You used my son. You forged my name. You don't get to play the victim here." She spat a string of curses and left. That was the last time I saw her outside of a courtroom. The criminal trial was a grim procedural affair. Their defense crumbled under the weight of Sarah's evidence. The undue influence claim evaporated when Michael took the stand. He didn't just confirm his statement. He looked at Alina, seated at the defense table, and said, "I loved you, and you used that love as a weapon against my father." It was the final human nail in their legal coffin. Robert, Diane, and Marcus were found guilty on all major counts. Alina, the prosecution argued successfully, was the architect. She was convicted of financial exploitation of an elder and conspiracy. Sentencing was weeks away, but prison time was all but certain. The civil suit against me was dismissed with prejudice. The judge called it a frivolous and malicious attempt to obfuscate criminal conduct. It was over, the structure had been tested, and it had held. But when the gavel fell and the reporters dispersed, I was left standing in the ruins of what the verdict was supposed to fix. My son's marriage was ashes. He moved into a small apartment, shell-shocked and grieving a relationship that had never been real. The house was silent in a way that had nothing to do with peace. The generic art still hung on the walls, a monument to the violation. I had won. I had protected Sarah's legacy, my home, everything we built. But the cost sat in my quiet kitchen every Sunday, in the form of my broken son drinking coffee and staring into a future he no longer recognized. The battle was done. The war for our family's soul, however, was just beginning, and I had no blueprint for how to rebuild that. Sentencing day arrived with the quiet finality of a door closing. Robert, Diane, and Marcus each received state prison terms of 3 to 7 years for their roles in the conspiracy. The judge cited the predatory nature of the scheme and the exploitation of family trust. When it was Alina's turn, she stood, her defiance gone, replaced by a hollow stare. She was sentenced to 5 to 10 years for financial exploitation of an elder. The gavel fell. It was done. Michael and I walked out of the courthouse into a brittle spring sunlight. We didn't speak. We got into my car, and I drove us to the diner on the edge of town, the same one I'd gone to after the civil case was dismissed. We slid into a booth. He ordered a black coffee. I ordered tea. "I filed for divorce this morning," he said, not looking at me, tracing a crack in the Formica table. "Before coming to court, it felt necessary." I nodded. "I'm sorry, son." "Don't be," he said, and finally met my eyes. His were clear, but etched with a pain I knew would never fully fade. "You were right. Mom was right. I was living in a story they wrote for me. I just didn't want to read the ending." The aftermath was a slow, deliberate process of demolition and salvage. The first thing we did together was take down every piece of generic art Alina had hung. We didn't just take it off the walls. We carried it out to the curb for bulk trash pickup. We watched from the porch as the truck crushed the bland landscapes and soulless abstracts into splinters. Then we went into the basement, to the boxes I couldn't bring myself to open after Sarah died. We brought up every single photograph. The wedding portrait, the main vacation, the one with the clay on her nose. We bought new frames, simple, solid wood, and for an entire weekend, we refilled the hallway. We didn't just hang them back in the old spots. We created a new gallery, adding pictures of Michael as a boy, of the three of us, of Sarah in her classroom surrounded by her students' art. We reclaimed the space. We rebuilt the memory. It was during this process, as we were carefully positioning a photo of Sarah planting her oak tree sapling, that Michael found it. Taped to the back of the original, now cracked frame we were replacing was one last document. We had missed it in the first frantic search. It was a single sheet, a notarized letter from Sarah, addressed to both of us. To my boys, David and Michael, *, it read, "If you are doing this together, then the worst is over and you have found each other again. That was always my greatest hope. The money, the house, the legalities, they are just things. You are my legacy. Protect each other, love each other, forgive each other. And David, for heaven's sake, take the trip to Ireland we always talked about. Use the money from the secret account. Live a little, you've earned it. All my love, forever, Sarah." We stood there in the hallway, the two of us, holding opposite edges of her last message. We both cried, but for the first time in years, They were not entirely tears of grief. They were tears of recognition. She had been with us through all of it, her love the true foundation we'd been standing on. That letter became our blueprint. Michael started seeing a therapist to untangle the guilt and manipulation. He moved back home into his old room temporarily, not out of dependency, but out of a mutual, unspoken need for proximity as we healed. We talked, really talked, about his loneliness after his mom died, about how Alina's intensity felt like a lifeline, about his shame for not seeing the truth. I talked about my own failures, my retreat into silent grief, my failure to see his pain because I was drowning in my own. We also dealt with the practicalities. With Linda's help, we executed a proper ironclad estate plan, a will, a trust, clear directives. We did it together in full transparency. There were no secrets. The house was placed in a trust that would benefit Michael, but with stipulations and independent oversight to protect him and any future family he might have from predators. It wasn't about distrust, it was about wisdom. The community's reaction was mixed. Some people, those who had swallowed the initial smear campaign, avoided me at the grocery store. Others, the ones who knew Sarah, who saw Michael's slow return to himself, offered quiet support. I learned to stop caring about the narrative. The truth was in my home, in the photos on the wall, in my son's presence at the breakfast table. 8 months after the sentencing, Michael came to me with a proposal. He wanted to go back to school, not for law, but for social work. I want to help other people who have been manipulated, he said. Elder services, fraud advocacy, I need to make this mean something. I saw his mother's fierce compassion in his eyes. I told him I would support him any way I could. He moved into an apartment near the community college campus that fall. It was a healthy distance. Our Sundays together became a ritual, dinner at my place, or sometimes at his new, small apartment. We were father and son again, but also something new, survivors of the same shipwreck, who had managed to build a new boat from the wreckage. The final surprise, the one that cemented our new beginning, arrived in a plain manila envelope from the county clerk. It was a copy of a newly filed deed for the vacant lot next to my house, the one Sarah had always loved, saying it would be perfect for a garden or a future expansion. The purchaser was listed as the Sarah Mercer Legacy Trust, the trust I had created in her memory, funded by what remained of her secret account. Attached was a note from Linda. David thought you should see this. The lot went up for tax sale. The trust had the right of first refusal. Consider it Sarah's final gift, a blank space for whatever comes next. P.S. The title is clear. I showed it to Michael that Sunday. He smiled, a real, easy smile I hadn't seen in years. What should we do with it? He asked. I was thinking, I said, a community garden. Your mom would have liked that. A place for beauty that doesn't get locked behind frames. He nodded, yeah, she would. Last month, I finally booked the trip to Ireland. I'm going in the fall. Michael is driving me to the airport. He'll look after the house and the fledgling garden we've started to plan on Sarah's lot. The oak tree she planted in the backyard is over 15 feet tall now. On Sunday mornings, I sit in her rocking chair with my coffee and I look at the photos on the wall and I look at that tree. The foundation held, not just the foundation of the house, but the foundation she built in us, in me, in Michael. A foundation of love that is, it turns out, the one thing no forgery can replicate, no predator can steal, and no grief can truly erase. The war is over. The quiet in the house is no longer the silence of absence. It is the sound of peace, and it is enough. This story, our story, is not an anomaly. It's a blueprint. The National Council on Aging estimates that elder financial exploitation robs seniors of $36.5 billion every year. But the real cost isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in stolen peace, in fractured trust, in the silent erosion of a life's work behind a smile that calls itself family. What happened in my home happens in thousands of homes, in whispers and gradual asks, in forged signatures and manipulated affections. Experts say only 1 in 44 cases is ever reported. The rest fade into silence, victims bound by shame, by family loyalty, by the terrifying thought that no one will believe them. The greatest weapon these predators have is our own reluctance to see ugliness in those we love. They count on our denial. They bank on our grief. They construct a narrative where saying no is cruelty and protecting what you've built is selfishness. But a boundary is not a wall. It is the definition of where you end and someone else's entitlement begins. If you take anything from this, let it be this: trust your unease, document everything, have the difficult conversations about money, property, and plans with your family before a crisis makes them urgent. And listen to the quiet people in your life, the ones like Sarah, who see the cracks in the foundation long before the structure groans. Legacy isn't just what you leave behind, it's what you refuse to let be taken. My name is David. This was my story. Thank you for listening. If you found this perspective valuable, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the stories happening just beneath the surface of everyday life. Until next time.